Hello, everybody. How's it going? This is John Wydogen with Natural Freedom League at naturalfreedomleague.com. Here again with my producer and co-host, Chill Will Keller.
What's up, brother?
Doing good, Will. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks.
Good. Today we have on a activist, a friend. I've known her for a few years through the health freedom movement. Founder of A Voice for Choice Advocacy. Is that what you call it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yep. Christina Hildebrand, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Definitely like to have people on who are fighting for freedom. And as the title of Voice for Choice says, Christina has been a voice for people in the health freedom movement who want to have a choice as to what medical procedures you have to undergo, and fighting the demon head on in Sacramento. I know she has to be kind of nice to them, but got to be political, you know. But yeah, we kind of just, we like to know kind of where you're from, how you got to be where you're at, and yeah, kind of just the basic history of A Voice for Choice Advocacy.
Sure. So as I said, as you said, my name's Christina Hildebrand, and A Voice for Choice Advocacy is our for 501c4 nonprofit. So that's an advocacy nonprofit. We also have A Voice for Choice, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, which educates. And I started both of those in 2015. Which was, and I live in California. So for anybody who lives in California, 2015 was a pivotal year because we lost our personal belief exemptions for vaccines for schools. And so prior to that, for my accent, you can probably hear, I grew up in England. I went to college on the East Coast, and I moved to California right before having my oldest kid. That was 15 years ago. And I was relatively health oriented, you know, ate well. I grew up with homeopathy. So in England, homeopathy is sort of put right next to Western medicine because the Queen uses homeopathy. So one of the things if you ever go to England, or if you grow up in England, the big thing is if the Queen does it, then it's okay for the people to do it. And so homeopathy is considered something that's sort of normal. And so my mother, I remember it wasn't until I got into the health freedom fight in California that I looked back on my life and looked at, you know, the number of vaccines or lack of vaccines that I had gotten. And also the fact that we had a homeopathic first aid kit in our bottom drawer. And I didn't realize sort of how much of natural medicine I'd been raised on, and how much sort of good food that I had been raised on, healthy food that I'd been raised on. And so come 2015, I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, and 15 years ago, in 2005, I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, and I wanted a natural birth. There was not much on the internet. I downloaded a birth plan, and one of the questions, you know, the questions were about breastfeeding and what kind of diapers, and if you were having a boy, circumcision. And one of the questions was about the hepatitis B vaccine, and would you get that, you know, in the first 12 hours? And I was just like, okay, I'm really confused because I don't know anything about hepatitis B, but what I do know is it's sexually transmitted. And so I started going down the rabbit hole, and I'm a researcher by profession. And I am a type A personality. And so I started going down the rabbit hole and just couldn't understand why, you know, the hepatitis B vaccine was given. Decided, don't really need that. At the time, if you'd asked me before I did any research, you know, what are vaccines? I would have said, oh, they're a virus and some saline water, and they stop you from getting a disease. I knew nothing basically about vaccines. Although what's interesting in England, the vaccine requirements, well, there aren't requirements for school, but there are vaccine recommendations in the UK are much fewer, and were much fewer when I was growing up. So I had the diseases. I had measles, mumps, rubella, scarlet fever, chickenpox, whooping cough, you name it, I had it. And amazingly, I'm alive. And then I started researching, for my daughter. I was just like, okay, if we don't do the hepatitis B vaccine, what's the next vaccine? And I kind of went through each one. And because I'd had all the diseases when I was a child, I knew I would have the antibodies in my breast milk, and I was planning on breastfeeding her. And so it kind of was, definitely wasn't anti-vaccine, was planning on giving whatever vaccines were needed. But as I went down this rabbit hole, it was kind of, okay, do we need this one? And went through each one and looked at the diseases and looked at the, the pros and the cons and of the vaccine, and of, what's the risk of getting the disease. And I mean, at that time, it was nothing like it is today. It was Sherry Tenpenny had 2 DVD videos that I bought, and then there were probably 3 or 4 other books out there. There was one vaccination Yahoo group with like 2,000 people on it. And, and this was only 15 years ago. And I was just like, so we decided, we talked to our doctor about it. We decided not to vaccinate, sort of it was more a delayed, we're not going to do it today. Well, we still need to continue research. And so 15 years later, my child is still not vaccinated. But it wasn't until 2015 that I even thought this was a real issue. I mean, I looked at it, and, me, my ex, my partner at the time, and my daughter and the pediatrician were the only people in the school, because we had to sign a personal belief exemption, but they were the only people that knew that she wasn't vaccinated. And to me, it was, like having cancer. You don't go broadcast that to the world. Some people do, I guess, but most people don't. Or any other medical issue or decision. So it was in 2015 that SB 277 was put through. And I had been aware of AB, what was it, AB 1925, or the one like 3 years earlier that Senfran brought forward, where you had to get your doctor's signature in order to get a personal belief exemption, and the doctor was supposed to tell you the risks and the benefits of the vaccine. And that I had seen that, and I was like, oh, that's no problem. I mean, we've had the conversation with our doctor a million times. I have no problem, it's going to be no problem for me to get that signature. I had no idea how politics worked at this point here in the States. I grew up in England. I know how English politics work. I do have an American passport, so that I could vote, but I voted very much down party lines, and didn't even think about who I was voting for. And 2015 was a real wake-up call. And I was, at the beginning, I just went to Sacramento and was like, I'm one of the people here. I'm protesting, our voices are going to be heard with the thousands of people we have here. And our voices just weren't heard. And I realized it was the second hearing in the Senate, the education hearing, and we had the votes. Senator Pan did not have the votes. And we were all sitting there going, yes, it's gonna die. In Oregon and Washington, their bills had died. And so we were like, okay, it's gonna die, we're good. And then the chair said, would you like to come back next week with the vote? And we were just like, what the heck was that? Like, how, and I realized then and there that none of us really knew how that building worked. We thought that our voices would be heard when we showed up, and it certainly is not the case. And I realized at that point, I was just like, we need to get somebody in that building that knows what they're doing. And so I ended up starting a Voice for Choice advocacy and hiring a lobbyist. And, I will tell my lobbyist to this day, I hate having to hire lobbyists, because I think they're the scum of the scum, and we should, the people's voice should be much louder than the lobbyist voice, but it's just not the way life works in that building. And so that was basically the start. And then, it's progressed since then. I know your show and your feeling is sort of anarchy and being outside of the government. I feel that way strongly personally. But given that I'm stuck here in California, at least for the next few years, I also feel like we have to educate. And so I look at things through 3 lenses: the legislative lens, the legal lens, and the people lens. And I do think the greatest effect we have is with the people and educating the people. And we spend, I would say, most of our time on that. But we, I think it's naive to think that we shouldn't be doing something legislative or legally. And, we had a beautiful lawsuit against SB 277. I had two amazing constitutional lawyers write it. And I basically said to them, you need to write it so that any pro-vaccine judge can rule in our favor. And so they took three issues that had been in front of the Supreme Court and won in the Supreme Court, which were bodily autonomy, parental rights, and the right to education. All three of those have been individually won. And we argued, basically we argued on those three, and we figured, okay, even if they don't take all three, if they go with one of them, we've got to win. And the judge did not even want to hear our case. I mean, he literally dismissed our case. We took it to appeal that they would even hear our case. And in the appeals court, one of the judges just could not stop talking. You have 15 minutes of oral argument in an appeals court, and the judge could not stop talking about polio. And there was no way, our case had nothing to do with polio. There was no polio in it. There was no science in it. There was nothing to do with public health in it even. It was those three things. And he couldn't stop talking about polio. And I just realized this is a lost cause. Like they just don't understand our issue. Because it has the word vaccine in it, it's completely toxic. Mm. So the legal side of thing, I'm very, very skeptical of people. I'm very cautious of people, to people sort of when I give advice to take anything to the courts, because I think our court system here, especially in California, is completely biased. I think we've seen cases in Texas or opinions written in Texas and places like that actually are in our favor. I think the other thing is, if we had our case now, we probably would have taken it to the Supreme Court, because of the way the Supreme Court is the balance of the Supreme Court currently. But 3 years ago, that wasn't an option. We would have lost it. So we didn't want to set precedents there. And then legislatively, we have our goal has been to become an organization that is considered professional in the Capitol. And we are trying to, so our organization's mission is, I should have started with this, is to educate and advocate for informed choice and transparency of what goes into your body, be it food, air, water, pharmaceuticals, whatever. We want you to know what's in it, and you decide whether you want that inside you. So my favorite example is, if you want to go into a hamburger joint and they use pink slime in their hamburgers, that, I don't care whether you eat it or not, but I want you to know that it's got pink slime in it and what that is. So last year we had a menstrual product labeling act that actually made it all the way through the legislature, and the governor signed it. And what was interesting there, the reason why I picked that bill was it was passed in New York the year before, and Andrew Cuomo, the governor, put out a tweet that said, every woman should know what goes into her body. We passed this bill on labeling menstrual products. And I was just like, yes, I agree. Absolutely. So our goal, when we go into legislative offices and say the word vaccine, we may as well have the door slammed on our faces. Whereas if we go in, like last year where we went in, talked about menstrual products and how, you should label them, you should know what the ingredients are, you should know, it's our body, our choice, bodily autonomy, all of that good stuff. They're quite happy to vote, Democrats specifically are happy to vote on those bills and be educated on them. So this year we haven't gotten a bill sponsor because they've cut down their legislative packets, but this year we're looking to do a bill on non-toxic cleaning products in schools. So removing bleach and quaternary ammonia from schools. And similar, it's all about knowing what the ingredients are, the toxins, our kids, it's having those conversations without using the word vaccine, because right now we can't have it. And we know we won't get vaccine legislation passed in California until probably 2023, because that's when Senator Penn and Assemblymember Gonzalez are out of office. So.
And then the next crooks go in.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I don't know that any can be as bad as Senator Penn and Lorena Gonzalez. And Lorena Gonzalez is disliked for many other reasons, not just this issue. So I think a lot of people in California that will be happy to see her go.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast things can progress, right? How you were saying, 15 years ago, it was just a few vaccines. Now it's up to, I don't know how many, over 30, right?
Yeah. Well, it's so for school, it's 10 different diseases. There's like 30, there's 22 physical shots, and then there's like 49 disease, doses. So it's crazy. It's a crazy amount that they need in school, and it shouldn't be. My ultimate goal is that no health procedure should be required. And we're not going in the right direction, by the way, but no procedures should be required for school. They should be independent. If these vaccines are good enough, they should be able to, your doctor and society should be the ones that are convincing you that this is the right way to go, rather than having them mandated for school. There's no reason why they should be mandated for school or even required for school.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's powerful about what you do is by challenging the system and by being that voice, what it actually does is it shows the corruption in the system, right? So we, like you said, no one knew how it worked, and then everyone got to see how it works. And the more that gets shown, I think not only do we learn techniques of maybe deeper lawful type information. We had Cal Washington on recently, the notice of liability. That type of understanding develops because you challenge the system and because you showed it for what it was. Because what it really points to is that these people are all paid off. I will grant it, there's been a hell of a marketing scheme to make it seem like vaccines are the most amazing things ever. But that judge was paid off. The legislator was paid off. They can change the rules whenever they want. That's why I think for me, like kind of seeing the process, it definitely pushed me more towards breaking away from that system and showing it for what it is, that it's like it's only valid in that you agree to it. But then that opens up a can of worms, because then that means you're kind of outcasted from society. You find out that these things that you thought were rights are actually privileges, given to you by the state,
right?
Like public education. We found out that's not a right. It comes with strings attached.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I realized in this whole process, or one of the big things, is the amount of fear. So I do think you're correct in the corruption and the money. So that is 100% there. And, it's why, just on a tangent, people are like, oh my God, half the people were saying, oh my God, Trump's in office. Now half the people are saying, oh my God, Biden's in office. It doesn't matter who your president is. That was crystal clear that, it really doesn't matter who your president is, because who's running the country are the lobbyists and the special interests and the staffers that are there. So to me, the money is what speaks, but there is another factor that is this fear factor that just in COVID has exacerbated it or brought it to the forefront, because people are just afraid, and the marketing of fear is amazing. And I think, the job that they have done in marketing fear is amazing. I look at, so many of the legislators and the judges are afraid the decision that they make, if they don't go the vaccine choice, they don't go the vaccine way, that they are going to start and be responsible for the next pandemic. And it is amazing to me. I mean, it was that, you know, as I said, that's what happened in our appeal case. And I was just like, can you just shut up about, I mean, we had 15 minutes to talk, and my lawyer was just like, yeah, it has nothing to do. I mean, he could have gone down the polio route, but that had nothing to do with it. He didn't want to spend the 15 minutes on polio, but he could, you know, he was telling the judge, you know, in not in much nicer terms and diplomatically, can you shut up about polio? Because it doesn't have anything to do with our case. But that's what, I mean, the fear piece of this. I mean, the fear piece, for example, you know, if you go into a regular doctor's office and you're offered the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, if you don't get it, your child is going to die from the measles. That is going to happen. And are you going to be responsible for that? So you better get the vaccine. I mean, the fear in this system is just amazing. And that, I think that's the piece that really, you know, really I was not aware of prior to getting into this.
Yeah, fear and ignorance, right? They go hand in hand. Yep. They definitely they market it, they promote it. And when people are in a state of fear, then they're way easier to control, and they just, you know, the abdication of rights and responsibility just goes right out the window.
Yeah.
So you're right. Education is definitely the answer.
Yeah. And that's why, I mean, I will say, you know, I look at COVID, I look at the last year, and it's, you know, a nightmare in so many ways. But I also will say that I think it's a complete silver lining. I don't think anyone, any one of us, or even our movement, you know, when I say movement, it's health freedom, it's vaccine truth, it's a corruption awareness, all of that. There is no way we could have woken up so many people as have been woken up and educated in the last year. I mean, I think most people taking the COVID vaccine, even if they take it, understand way more about it than any vaccine that they've taken prior to this. And I think there's you know, we know there's a lot more hesitancy. And so to me, you know, I look at I always find this, I always try and find the silver lining in things. And so to me, that's you know, it's amazing, and we just have to keep educating people, and we just have to do it, you know, just plant the seeds and then water them. But, you know, people aren't going to wake up overnight and realize it, but we have so much groundwork to work on, that it's really, it's amazing to me.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in terms of, you know, the difference between typical what you think of as protesting against something, as opposed to getting out there and educating people about, you know, the opposite of that, basically. But you do cover that as well, but it's not from the position, you know, at least what we go do, because we kind of take that same model, like that came from the health freedom movement, of like learn the risk or V is for vaccine, where we go out teaching about natural law, you know. So but I agree, like it is a protest, but it's funny, that word protest, because it doesn't have to mean the negative. You can protest the positive, you can protest an idea, a thought, you know. So protesting is just the act of speaking it, kind of, you know. Even the word pro is in it, right? You're like, it's in the positive. So, you know, where some people look down on like being that voice or having that voice, it is important to do it. And again, it exposes the flaws in the system, and hopefully eventually, like you said, that silver lining, it wakes people up. I kind of thought, I imagined, you know, creating like a Republican anarchic party, right? The RAP. And like what you would do is you would just promise to not create any new laws. You know, like, we're not going to make anything new. We're going to work with what we have, you know, because that's the one thing about.
Oh, I'm going one further. Not that I will ever run for governor, because I never want to, but if I ran for governor, I would have two things in my platform. The first one is restricting the number of bills in the legislature. This is California specific. And that actually has happened this year, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But it used to be that every legislator had 30 to 40 bills every year. So that's 3,000, over 3,000 bills that go through the California legislature every year. I mean, why do we need 3,000 changes to our laws? I have no idea. So this year, last year with COVID, and this year, they've reduced it to 12 bills. So that we need to keep that for the future. It does make things like our bills much harder because they're not critical bills, so to speak. And then the other thing that I would do is for every bill that's brought forward, you have to strike 2 bills or 2 pieces of the law, 2 statutes. So for every one you bring forward, you're getting rid of 2 because we need to, California's statute is so much bigger than any other state. The other thing, I don't know if people realize that are watching. So the other difference between California and any other state is our legislature is in session from January until September every single year. That's 9 months of the year. In most other states, it is a much shorter cycle, or for example, in Texas, it's every other year. And it's only 3 months every other year. In Montana, is the shortest, it's 6 weeks every other year. And even in places like New York or Virginia, it's 2-3 months a year. And so what that means is the legislators are actually doing their real work. They're, whatever they are, they're in their community with the people of their community, their constituents, and they're doing whatever they do. If they're a store owner or a dentist or whatever they are, they're doing that for the majority of their year. Whereas here in California, it's not. You are a legislature. You're nothing else. You don't do anything else. And so to me here, it's a bizarre place to be from a legislative perspective, because it's not, we just have so many laws and bills that are coming through. It's quite amazing to keep track of. I at the beginning, around this time, I go through all the bills that have been put forward, and it is, I go through every one of them, read it to make sure that it doesn't fall into our purview in any way, or if it does, we'll support it or go against it. But it's crazy here in California, the legislative system compared to other places.
Yeah, that is crazy. I mean, it's just like, that's the one thing, again, like, just, I was the same way. Like, I was even different than you. Like, I was, a critical thinker, but I never even thought about the vaccine thing. Same thing. Like, I got some when I was a kid. I figured it was the same process for my kid. I trusted the doctor. And then I think it was when swine flu happened, it made me like, this seems kind of fake. Like they're just overhyping it.
Yeah.
And then the flu shot, the conversation around the flu shot, because I worked in childcare and I was like, I'm not getting the flu shot. And I was like, my grandfather lived to like 86. He was born in 1800s, and he never had a vaccine, or if he did, maybe one, or a few, like back in the day. But I'm like, why would I get a flu shot? And but then it wasn't till they passed that law that I realized, whoa, like, first I thought, wow, well, why would anyone get a vaccine exemption? That was my first thought. Was, I didn't even think of that. And then once I started looking into it, and then the thought of, why are they trying to force it on people? So
to me, that's the biggest question. If these are wonder drugs, okay, if they are, or wonderful medical treatments, then they should sell themselves, but they don't. And so it to me, then you have to question, okay, so what really is going on? If they're forcing you to get these in order to get a government, or, to get school, to get education, what is going on there?
Yeah, it's a scam.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was saying it's a scam for sure.
Yeah,
and people don't think they have options.
No.
But we homeschool our daughter, and she hasn't had any vaccines, and we had a natural birth, and we actually
Yeah.
lucked out. I was just in the beginning stages of my awareness, and we just ran across a phenomenal midwife in Berkeley. So she
Yeah.
kind of like almost jump started our path to parenthood. So that was
Yeah.
nice. We lucked out in that case. But
Yeah.
there's many options for people to look into, and it does start with education. And I
Yeah.
think vaccines and the science institutions and government institutions, they're faulty all the way through. So people need to look at other options outside of the system.
Yeah. I mean, the amazing thing to me is that this, and it's been extremely apparent this year, is that those that say they are looking at science and the data of science are not in any way looking at all the pieces. Because if you question the science, so science to me is, it's a debate, and it's a constant debate. The science is never settled. Like, for anyone to say the science is settled, and it's you, that sentence is used so much in the vaccine world, but for anyone to say the science is settled, science is never settled, or it wouldn't be science. And so,
Exactly.
science is a debate. One side, the other side, you put forward a study, and people question the study and are critical of it, and can it be replicated, can it show, is there something else that needs to be looked at? And that has gone out the window. And the people that say, have this religion of science, are looking at one thing and nothing else. And I will say, the vaccine skeptical, hesitant people that fall into that trap as well. I make sure that I actually read probably as much on the pro-vaccine side as I do on the I mean, I use the word anti-vaccine, but the vaccine questioning, hesitant side of things, because I want to see what they're saying. I want to look at their research. I want to look at all the pieces of it and make an educated decision. But it's amazing to me, this what's become a religion, especially when it comes to vaccines. But we saw this year, I mean, you take all the different anything that came out of Trump's mouth of a treatment suddenly became something that was taboo. And it's like, no, why are we politicizing it? Let's have a scientific debate and see, and allow people to to see both sides of things. But it's yeah, it's amazing to me. The other thing I wanted to say is, I mean, the one thing that I will say a Voice for Choice Advocacy does is find loopholes. So we're all about finding the loopholes in the law, and helping people work out what their options are. And with the COVID vaccine, we're seeing a lot of employers requiring it. I don't think many are actually requiring it, because most of them have a religious exemption, or you're able to decline it, although they don't state it in that way. I mean, it reminds me of probably 10 years ago when, you were told, okay, you have to go to school, well, you need shots. And it's like, nobody told you that there was a personal belief exemption or a religious exemption in your state, that it was, if you want to go to school, you need the shots. And I feel like it's the same way right now with the COVID vaccine and employers. And I think much of the time the employers don't know either. And so we've done a lot of education. We send out emails when people come to us with saying my employer is requiring me to get the COVID vaccine. Our organization will send the employer a letter just outlining the actual laws. And we tell the person, you can decline it. The issue with declining it is that they can fire you for it, so to speak, and there's no discrimination. But if you have a religious exemption and they fire you, then there's a religious discrimination case that you can put forward. So, but I think at this point, I would say most of the employers that quote unquote required it have sort of taken a step back and are not currently requiring it. They're sort of seeing how it goes. Big thing is, if you require the vaccine as an employer and an employee gets injured by it, it then goes against your workers' comp, and that gets really expensive if you have a lot of people claiming that. So
Yeah. Those loopholes, got to find those loopholes. That's awesome. That's really good. We have a friend that they were making her sign something saying that if you refuse the vaccine, you're responsible for harm to other employees.
Wow. I haven't seen that one.
Mm.
Huh.
Yeah, and that's a weird thought, because it's not like anyone, it's like where they have this idea where in the news they'll say, oh, they got this disease from this person. It's like they don't know who you got the disease from.
Well,
And
it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Sorry to interrupt you. It's
it's
interesting.
okay.
I was just thinking about that when you said that they're making the individual liable. Because, for example, you can't sue a corporation for getting COVID at work, because you didn't get COVID or whatever, flu or whatever it is, from the corporation. You can't get, or from the school, or from, you can't get COVID from a school or from a corporation. You can get it from an individual. So if you know the individual, but even then the individual has to have knowingly given it to you, so purposefully given it to you. So if they did, if they came to work and they were feeling ill and they went home and you got it, they, they didn't mean to give it to you. But if they, and the laws here in California, it's based on HIV and AIDS. So if you knowingly, and it's what broader than that, but that's where the law behind this came from. If you knowingly had AIDS and you knowingly gave it to somebody else and didn't tell them and they didn't accept that risk, then you can be, you can, then it's again
Liable.
you can be liable. But if you didn't know you had AIDS and you didn't, and you had sex with somebody and then you found out later and you had given them AIDS, you weren't liable at that point. And so the same thing with COVID. So I'm trying to work out if the person signs that piece of paper, again, as you said, it's only if you knowingly gave it to somebody,
Right.
Usually that person, unless they are in the room with you 24/7.
Right.
How do you know you got it from them and not from going to the grocery store or from touching, from going out and touching your mask and getting it, some other way? I mean, it just seems crazy that.
Yeah, fear tactics and just scare tactics.
That's what it is. A lot of it is just, they put it out there, but it's not based in reality. It's like they'll say, I saw one or a couple of them where they're like, a guy walked into a store for 15 seconds and walked out and contracted COVID. And it's like, common sense says, how do they know that's where he got it? Right. How do you know he didn't get it from touching the door on the way out? How do you know he didn't get it from the next guy he passed? It's like, and in the movie Contagion, they set that premise, right? Like they show the connection of the people who, this guy got it from the pig and then he gave it to her. It's like, and then they caught it on camera at like a casino or something, and they knew, oh, that was patient zero. And it's like, they don't know that. They don't have that system in place to know that person had it and passed it. And again, you would have to prove that they did it on purpose. Right. It's like, if I didn't know I was sick, and so it's just, the whole thing is, it's Alice in Wonderland. And when you get into those kind of concepts, it's all upside down, and people will take that and news articles are leading with that. I mean, it's crazy. So,
that's artificial, right? It's just, it's an artificial, it's like a false belief system or a false axiom. That's just like a mental construct that they're rolling with, and they market it and people just jump onto it.
And the more you say it, the more it is real, right?
Exactly. So. Yeah, for sure.
Marketing. It's the best marketing campaign ever, because I see people who, and again, I was one who didn't question it, but once you look into it, it's pretty clear you probably don't need or want any of that. You brought up homeopathy earlier. I mean, just learning the history of homeopathy versus allopathy, and allopathy was, they're the snake salesmen. They're the ones who are creating stuff out of chemicals, and they're the sorcerers, like mixing up the drug to make you, I even looked up the definition the other day, and the difference was homeopathy. You take things that give you similar symptoms to the disease.
Mm-hmm.
Allopathy, you take things that give you different symptoms than the disease. And it's like, and again, homeopathy really is the original vaccine, right? The concept behind homeopathy is you take something that would give you the same symptoms, you get it down to its essence, right? It's like,
Right. Yeah.
It's so diluted, it's a sugar pill.
Mm-hmm.
You take it, the concept is it gives you those symptoms, you build up an immunity to it, and then, so it's the original vaccine. Even that idea was hijacked from homeopathy.
Right.
And now, as you know, I mean, homeopathy is under attack,
Right.
from
Yep.
FDA. Like the FDA wants to ban homeopathy, but a vaccine that was studied for a year, like, yeah, let's go ahead and give it emergency.
Not even a year.
Not even a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. I mean, it's interesting, the whole like warpedness of the world. I put out a post in the beginning or middle of December that had a hypothesis that in the next 6 months, COVID's going to go away. It's going to go way down, and the vaccine's going to be attributable, and Biden is going to, or at that point it was whoever's the president is going to be attributable. But realistically, what's going to happen is three things. The definition of COVID is going to be changed. So what was defined as COVID last year will no longer be defined that way this coming year. It'll be different symptoms or not as many symptoms, much more refined. The PCR tests, so most of the PCR tests right now are go up to 40, and that anywhere between 30 and 40, especially between 35 and 40, gives a lot of false positives. And a lot of asymptomatic cases are in that realm. So they're going to have which I think is a good thing, but it's not a good thing for comparing. I think they're going to be much more strict. And we've already seen this with the World Health Organization this week coming out and questioning the PCR test and saying, there are problems with it. But we're going to see the cycle thresholds be reduced to a place where you're only really getting true positive COVID cases. And then the other thing that's going to happen is that we're going to see people not dying with COVID anymore, but just dying from COVID. And so if you put all of those three together, you just diminished your number of COVID cases. And it will be because the vaccine rolled out, and because we've been social distancing, lockdowns, and just Biden is, an amazing person.
Yeah.
And our governor, shouldn't forget our governor. And all the other Democrat states that have governors that have done the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I can see it happening before us. All of the things that I hypothesized are happening already. And so it's to me.
Oh, it happened like that. Like they didn't even wait. They're just so blatant about it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So blatant. That's why
but there are so many people still asleep and don't realize it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem, right?
That's the crazy
majority
thing.
of people are still asleep and completely unconscious to these issues. So what you were just saying makes me think, 3 years from now, when there's the next threat or the next new vaccine is out, that the majority of people line up and take that as well. It's just, so it's a win for the vaccine people if that's the case, unfortunately.
I don't think I think yes, but I think it is. I think there is more and more people questioning. So,
Sure.
I mean, look at the polls, there's 60%, somewhere between 40 and 60% are saying they wouldn't get this vaccine right now. They want to wait, they want to see, truly FDA approved, which, you know what, I get that they still may ultimately get the vaccine. But I think it's opened up their mind to questioning. And once you start that questioning, I think for most people, I do think there are people that go back to sleep, but I think for most people, there's an awakening. And then you have like Moderna came out yesterday or today, and said, well, you know, our vaccine covers 2 of the variants. It doesn't cover 1 of the variants. And so you'll have to have a booster shot, a 3rd vaccine dose for, you know, the next variants. And we'll put that in there. And I'm sitting there going, oh,
Wow.
like this is, you know, and I think people at some point, I think 3 is probably, I think the 3rd one will turn people off. I don't think people, and I'm sitting there going, okay, the 2nd dose is supposed to have really bad side effects compared to the 1st dose. What's the 3rd dose going to have? I mean, if you're having, you know, exponentially bad side effects, dose number 3, you know, how many people is that going to kill, kind of thing, or harm, seriously harm? So I just, I think it's interesting because, again, I look at 2015 and what they did in California with the vaccine mandates, and I truly believe that they shot themselves in the foot. I mean, prior to 2015, we would never be on this call. You know, we just wouldn't, because we wouldn't know each other. We wouldn't have gotten in touch with each other. We wouldn't be talking about this stuff. And so, you know, I look at it and I'm just like, you for the 2.7% of kids that had personal belief exemptions in 2015, for 2.7% of kids, you just woke up a angry mama bear or an angry papa bear, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I look at it and I'm just like, wow, like that was really stupid. I mean, you could have they could have increased the 2.7 or decreased the 2.7 probably by a percentage point, just doing, you know, clinics and education and, you know, other things. I was just like, yeah, it's crazy.
Let me offer
Happened.
another just another competing narrative
Sure.
to what you're saying, because this is something that I pondered when I was in the health freedom movement, is that it was all for COVID. It was all a dialectic that they knew. So, and this brings up the Hermetic principles, right? The principle of polarity, right? They know that they create this debate. Because I used to think, why are they letting us have this debate, right? Like, you had this sense of like, you know, you would get it was like they were playing with your emotions. We would get a win, and then we'd get a loss, and then we'd get a win, and then we'd get a loss. And you know, Del Bigtree would get a win, and then you know, Kennedy would do something, you know, and it was like we're stuck in a dialectic. And when COVID hit, I kind of thought this is what they were doing it for. So if you consider the idea is they're trying to get us to be transhuman, that they knew they had to polarize it so much that there would be this faction of the population that would take it no matter what. And they normalized the injury by us having the debate, right? So there's a saying, I think E40 made this up. He says, people will bury themselves alive just to prove they know how to use a shovel, right? And it's like, that's what I kind of think is happening in a way. It's like, now that you can't deny that vaccine injury is a real thing. People know that a vaccine reaction is a real thing. Everyone knows now. And the people that are pro are, they're going to take it because, again, the marketing, the belief system, the polarization tactic that's used against us. So it's just another thought. I mean, that's
I agree with you completely. I do think it is. The piece that I don't know that they counted on was how what the right word is. How vigorous isn't the right word, but how vigorous we are and how much we, you know, how much we have come together. And I say that, you know, there are definitely fractions and within, you know, within the movement and stuff. But I think it's, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes from here, because I agree with you that they absolutely need the polarization to get at least some people to take it and to do their, I mean, I look at this last year, and, you know, I reread, probably in 2019, I reread Brave New World and 1984. And I, you know, I knew it, I was looking at it and I was like, oh my God, we're there. And we hadn't even hit COVID. But I look at it and, you know, I do think we have to get out of the system. You know, and I say that I play in both parts. I play in the system and I play outside the system, in, you know, in my sandboxes in both places. But for me personally, I think it's really, you know, when I look at my life, I look at my life outside the system, because I think you know, I truly, anybody who has not read A Brave New World or 1984, or hasn't read them in the last year or two, go back and read them or listen to the audiobooks, because that's where we're headed. We're even there, you know, I think we're partially there. And I think, you know, we have to, as a community, find the people who don't want to live in that system. Has to find a, you know, you have to find your niche. You have to live outside that system, and it is not going to be easy. I mean, I look at things like, people ask me, well, how are you going to travel, Christina? You know, I have family in Europe, and I look at it and I go, I don't know, because I'm certainly not getting this vaccine. So does that mean I don't see my family again? Does it mean I don't travel? I was talking to somebody today and I said, you know, I think this is where the black market and gray markets are going to thrive. And I do, you know, I do have hope, and I do feel that, that we're in a time of change, severe change, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I do think the people win out in the end. I don't think we're there at this point. But I think we're in a cycle. You know, I think we're in, if you look at the empires, right? If you look at the Roman Empire went huge, and then it collapsed. And I think we're close to collapsing. I don't know how many years it's going to take, but I think we as people have to work out, how are we going to navigate this in the gray and the black market. And the gray market is, to me, much more interesting than the black market. So, you know, it's and it's where I come up with, you know, what are the loopholes? How do you get around things? How do you do things? How do you get to travel? How do you get a driver's license, or not have a driver's license, and, you know, drive without one? And how do you, if you get stopped, how do you navigate that? And I know you're doing stuff with natural law that, you know, ties into that piece of it. How do you use cryptocurrency, you know, to pay for stuff? How do you get out of the economic side of things that the government wants you to be in? You know, it's I have to say, California is not an easy place to do this. But it is, you know, I think that's the piece that, as people, we have to look at, how do we live outside the system? And I think we are going to be at the forefront of what comes next if we do that. But having said that, I will go back to, I also have people I know that, you know, I get the question, well, are there nanochips in the vaccine? You know, are there things that can track you in the vaccine? And I'm like, there could be. There's, the technology is there. Do I know if there is or not? No, I absolutely don't. But, you know, the fact that Bill Gates is so heavily invested makes me question it. And I was trying to convince a friend of mine, I don't know whether he's a friend of mine, he is all for the vaccine. And, you know, I said, well, what if there's a nanochip that, you know, AI, transhuman, you know, that, and he was just like, I can't wait to get it. Like, I can't wait to have that technology in me, and to be to be that next place. And I mean, he's the person with the latest iPhone all the time, and all the health tracking's on, and all the, you know, and I'm just like, wow, like, you actually want to be one of those people. Like, and he truly sees it as a positive and a benefit to the world and to himself, to be able to have AI in himself. And I'm just like, wow, okay, yeah, no way, no way.
Yeah.
I mean, we also have arguments about self-driving cars, and having a Tesla that drives itself versus my, I would love to drive. I love driving a stick shift. Not that I have one, but if I have a choice, I'll drive a stick shift any day. And I'm just like, that just describes me because, but yeah, no, I mean, I think there are people out there that, I look at A Brave New World, I look at 1984, and to me, it's a melding of the two is where is where part of this world is headed. And there are people that want that are happy, would be happy living in that society.
Yeah. I know people like that personally.
Yeah.
And, you see like Elon Musk coming out with the Neuralink. I know people that said that they'll get that right away as soon as it comes out, so we are definitely in this transition of consciousness where the transhumanistic is evolving and more of the natural human, I guess you would say. It's and these two, they're splitting. We can see that. And then
Yeah.
like Brave New World, those are like playbooks of what's going on right now. It's
Mhm.
mind-blowing to go back and read those for the first time, and highly recommend it for people to do that, give you a glimpse of actually what's going on. But it's a common thread that we've with our guests that said exactly what you just said, that there is a parting, and that's part of the silver lining with COVID. The beginning of 2020, I got connected with so many like-minded individuals in such a small period of time. It was fascinating. And then seeing all these groups of people, Derek Bros is doing, the Greater Reset, and all kinds of other people doing similar things. So it's fascinating and it's amazing. It's definitely a fascinating time to be alive, for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Go ahead.
really curious to see where it goes. I mean, I think there's huge potential in both ways, whether it's positive or negative potential, that's a difference. But I think there's huge potential both ways. I'm really curious to see where it goes. And I don't see, I don't see the transhuman side winning out completely. Like I really don't see that happening. Do I see it being there? Yeah. And I don't see, it's interesting because Brave New World has the, savages, and they're in really bad place. And I don't think we're going that bad on that side. I think the people who are into natural living and into like you mentioned, Derek Bros, freedom cells and sort of self-sustaining communities, and I think those will, I think the knowledge is there and the intelligence is there to make it something that is truly going to be amazing from a nature and organic and everything else standpoint. But it's really going to be interesting to see the juxtaposition of the two.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think transhumans are more likely to kill each other than the
Well,
natural folks.
well, and you got to remember that part of the plan is to eliminate a lot of the population. So, I think the people living naturally will hopefully be able to sustain themselves more.
Yeah.
One concept I wanted to bring up was in terms of some of the division in the health freedom movement, what we've kind of discovered is it really came down to the argument of choice versus the argument of what you would call maybe an abolitionist, where, like ideologically for ourselves, we would be abolitionists.
Mm-hmm.
But in society and where we're at right now in the world, you can't, what I like to say is you can't legislate morality, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to, you have to give the people the choice, even if the action is harmful in general for, according to natural law. So
Yep.
it harms all of us. Like, for example, abortion.
Yep.
You still have to start at a place of choice, and you have to educate on morality.
Yes.
And so I think that's where the division is drawn, but I think people need to realize that that's where we're at. And just like we're talking about, people are going to choose to get the vaccine, and there's going to be
Yep.
people you love, and you have to come to a point of acceptance, and you have to give them the freedom to make their own choice. You can
Yep.
try to tell them, as much as
Yep.
you can, but at some point you have to let people make their decision and have their free will.
Yeah, I think, we are called a voice for choice advocacy. And, if you ask me, would I ever take the vaccine? No, I will never take the vaccine. So I have but I have done my research on it. I think I agree with you. There is a very strong division between people who, are like me, where I really want you to be educated. And if you go through all of the information that I send you, and you still at the end of the day say, yes, I'm going to take the vaccine, I've made that informed decision, you're a human, you're an adult. For children, it's different, but you're an adult and you get to make that decision. And the choice you make is you have to live with the consequences of that ultimately. I think the place that, I do think uh, just saying absolutely not, nobody should be vaccinated, nobody should, we actually, from a vaccine perspective, it would be really, really harmful to just stop vaccination tomorrow, because we will absolutely will see a rise in all those diseases. And especially in the US, I mean, we've seen it with COVID. Part of the reason why our deaths are so high in the US is because we don't have the nutrition. We don't have the health in the US. I mean, we have 54% of kids are chronically ill. That, until we get that taken care of, I'm not saying our kids should be vaccinated or those kids should be vaccinated, but in tandem with health, you have to look at so much more than just disease. You have to look at the nutrition, you have to look at the water, you have to look at the other toxins in their environment. That it's not as black and white. The other thing that I think is, for the people that are not aware or not knowledgeable on the vaccine issue specifically, but it applies to any other issue, honestly. If you come to them and say, don't vaccinate, it's bad, your first reaction, if you believe in vaccines or you have no idea, but you just, is to get defensive and be like, no, 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 I just shot up my kid with 50 vaccines. No, they're fine. And putting people on the defensive is never good. Being rude to people, putting people on the defensive, all of those things, being aggressive, is there a time and place for it? Yes, there may be, but it's very, very specific. For the most part, when you're talking to somebody who has believed in vaccines their whole life, they know nothing else. They know, they trust their doctor. They've been told to take the flu shot. They've been told to get this. It's all good. And if they haven't had a severe reaction that they can put one to one with, which I think there are many, many people that are vaccine injured, but they don't even know they're vaccine injured because it didn't occur. It wasn't vaccine die or vaccine, huge reaction, which I think we're actually going to see with this vaccine. But I think, talking to people and sort of just planting the seed, making them think about, oh, maybe this isn't the best thing, is much more, you gain much more than if you come at them with vaccines are bad, because they think vaccines are good and they've most likely taken a whole bunch of vaccines. So what you're telling them is they're bad, and that doesn't usually help the situation. So I think, but I love your way of putting it, that you have to educate on morals, because it's so true.
I like using the Socratic method. You're asking
Yep.
the individual questions to
Mm-hmm.
stimulate critical thinking. And
Yep.
ultimately that's almost the most effective thing, is that we're planting seeds
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of spark their cognitive ability, to get them thinking about things. Hopefully that, grows and plants
Yeah.
and grows roots.
And I think COVID has given us an opportunity where seeds have been planted that we don't even know. And that it helps us completely, because people are hyper aware, because I mean, that's one thing I will, regardless of where you land on the political spectrum, which I don't land in either place, but I actually thank Trump for bringing transparency to the vaccine process. There are so many more people in this world that understand how vaccines are made and the ingredients and the side effects and everything else. I do think it's, I think that even if it's, and I go back to, your comment on 2015 and bringing it up and going to this greater, the Great Reset and Economic Forum and all that. I do think there is a piece of that to play us against each other, but I do also think that Operation Warp Speed did a lot for opening the dialogue with people that wouldn't normally have opened that dialogue. I mean, I see it, I keep the vaccine truth movement out of my kids' school because I, as much as I can, I should say, I want them to be happy at school and not taint it. But this year, there are parents who, I had no idea that they knew what I did, have come up to me, and, I know they fully vaccinate their children. I mean, fully vaccinate their children, and have come up to me and said, I don't think I'm going to get this COVID vaccine. I don't want to be the first person to get it, or in the first round, I'm going to wait, a while to get it. And I'm just like, oh, okay, let me just get my watering can out here.
There you go.
Getting that seed to grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Got to take the opportunity.
Yep.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us what you have going on and where people can reach you?
Sure. So voiceforchoiceadvocacy.org is our website, and that has everything on it. If you go to that website and there's a pop-up and you can sign up for our newsletter. Our newsletter, we send out important stuff. We send out action alerts. We don't send out a huge amount of stuff, but what we send out is important. If you want to follow us, we just got put in Twitter jail, but we're on Twitter, Facebook, Telegram, Parler when it's around. I think that's all of them. YouTube, BitChute, and we're A Voice for Choice is the handle on all of those. So you can follow us there. I am speaking, you mentioned the Greater Reset, which is Derek Brose's talk, conference, which started today. I am talking on Sunday on COVID vaccines and mandates. And I am also talking, I'm just trying to find the name of it because I keep forgetting the name, but I'm giving 3 talks at, what the heck is it? 1 second. Sorry, I should have gotten.
That's all right.
That's all right. No worries. We'll put the links in the descriptions.
Yeah, now I'm completely losing it. No, I don't have it. 1 second, let me see if I can find it. Nope. It is, I'll email it to you and you can put it in the bottom. But it's something like the health freedom.
So like a conference?
Conference. I've completely lost it. There next week, the 4th, 5th, and 6th, I'm giving 3 talks. One of them is on the COVID and vaccines. One of them is on the sort of food and food security, because I didn't mention that, but the other thing that I have is a food delivery service that delivers Health Freedom Now. Thank you. A Force for Good is what it's called. So one of them is on sort of farm to consumer marketplace. I have a Weston A. Price food delivery service in the Bay Area, and kind of knowing where you get your food and food security in times of a pandemic, but also in times if things are going to go crazy, those types of things. And then one of them is on COVID and PCR tests and basically how to protect yourself and convince others. And then the other one is sort of more about what we talked about tonight, which is activism inside and outside the sandbox. So
That's right. I meant to ask you about that that food business that you started, because that's when I first met you, was through Suzanne, and
right.
she has people, they come by the house and they pick up groceries or food from her front porch. And yeah, she had told me that you had started that.
Yeah, so that one, if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, we deliver to 40 plus locations. We do home deliveries too, and that's realfoodbayarea.com. So we did it. All of our food is organic and nutrient dense.
A lot of great health info. Love it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Food is medicine. That's how I look at it.
Yep.
Well, we could probably keep talking about a lot more stuff, but I think that is a good length interview, and we appreciate you coming here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yep.
Thanks, Christina.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Will, good job.
Thanks, John. Yeah, another good one.
Yep. And always remember, put something good in the air and plant something good in the earth. Peace.